Do you wave your terrible towel when Renegade plays? Reach for a tasty cake when JJ shouts, "He scores!" Does the sound of an F1 engine make your heart race? Doing push-ups with a Nittany Lion after a TD? Then lend us an ear, and we will share the exhilaration of Steelers football, the excitement of Flyers hockey, the nail-biting finishes of F1, and the pride when we yell, "We are Penn State." Welcome to the SteelFlyers Show, the strangest combination of sports fandom since pineapple was put on pizza. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the SteelFlyers All Sports Network, SteelFlyers Podcast, and we have a very, very special panel to talk about all things Philadelphia Flyers. And that's right, folks, we bring the cream of the crop all the time for you listeners out there, and we got him right here, folks. We're talking about the voice of the Philadelphia Flyers, Mr. Jim Jackson from NBC Sports Philadelphia. How you doing, sir?
I'm great, Steel. How are you?
I am doing great. Thank you very much for joining. Really appreciate you being here, sir. Oh, we also got the main man, Pots and Pans from O B Puck. That is right, Isiah. How are you, sir? And welcome to the show.
I'm doing great. Glad to be aboard.
I got a special panel here for you folks today because we want to talk about a lot of things Philadelphia Flyers. There's a lot of things going on with the team right now, like the trade deadline coming up on the 21st. There's a lot of moving and shaking going on right now, even in the NHL. Plus, we're talking about Giroux's 1,000th game is coming up here on the 17th. A huge milestone for Claude Giroux. I want to get you guys' take on that big time. I also want to hear what you guys think about the Risto line and move and some insights on some of that as well, too. So we're going to dive right in, and we're going to get right to it. And the first question I'm going to say is this. We've all watched the team. We've all seen how the team has evolved to a point right now. And we've all seen the press conferences of Claude Giroux and the questions that he's being asked and things of that nature. And we've all seen his responses. And Jim, I know you've had conversations with him in the past. I want to ask you, I will let you know what I feel afterwards, but I want to know, do you really think he's going to leave Philadelphia, or do you think he's going to hop on the trade wins depending on who the team is? Because he has all the cards, right?
Yeah, well, he does. Obviously, he can turn down a trade to any team. There are those out there who feel because if it goes the way that people say, he's giving Chuck Fletcher certain teams to deal with, and then Chuck has to go get a deal. That limits Chuck. The best way to do it, obviously, is for Chuck to go out and get a deal, and then, have an idea at least of whether Giroux is willing to work with that team, and then, approach Claude. Because if you go in with one or two teams, you're really limiting that market, and that's not good for getting a great return. But the way things are going, from what I'm hearing, I think they're going to get a decent return. I do believe he is leaving. I think that. I don't think he wants to deep down, but I mean, let's look at this. He's got a chance to win a Stanley Cup, and some of the teams that are interested in him definitely have a chance to win the Stanley Cup. So with that, and the fact that he can actually go out and actually help the Flyers franchise in his last move with the franchise, at least for now, why not? There's always the option to come back if he so loves it here in Philadelphia, and his family loves it in Philadelphia, and he wants to come back. He can always come back as an unrestricted free agent at a hometown discount. But for now, I think the Flyers have to start adding assets. They've seen they didn't have enough depth in the organization. Injuries obviously took a huge toll this year, but they still should have been able to hold up a little bit better than they have. I don't know as if they would have made the playoffs given Sean Couturier's situation, Ryan Ellis' situation, Kevin Hayes' situation. But to completely bottom out, I think shows they need more assets in the organization. So I think they're going to try to add some with a Giroux trade.
Okay. Isiah, the same question to you. You've been following this team for, you've seen a lot that's happened with this team. And what is your feelings deep down? I mean, you've got a lot of insight. You speak to a lot of insiders as well. You speak to a lot of the media, a lot of people that's connected to the team. What is your insight on this whole Claude Giroux thing? I mean, do you think he's going to stay, or do you think he's going to go?
Well, I can't really add much more than what Jim had with regard to what Claude's heart is saying. The impression I get as just a 50-plus year fan is that if he had his druthers, he'd rather be staying in Philadelphia.
Yeah.
That seems to be the vibe, if you will. But I think in the end, especially if he's as dedicated to the organization and he wants to create a win-win scenario, he goes. And if he really wants to come back to play for the Flyers, he does a one-off with another team, and then he comes back.
Yeah.
Like, I guess it was Keith Tkachuk did something like that at one point, I think in St. Louis or what.
Did Doug Waite do it? I think Doug Waite did it once.
Yeah, I think he did too. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I think Doug Waite was part of that 2006 Carolina Stanley Cup champion. I'm not sure if he came back to the club that he came from at that juncture, but yeah, I mean, it does happen. It's pretty rare. I do think the Flyers will make a trade. I'm hearing that the three top contenders, and of course, this situation is fluid. We're less than a week away, and it could change on a dime, are the Colorado Avalanche, the Carolina Hurricanes, and Florida Panthers seem to be the three front runners right now as things.
Don't forget St. Louis.
St. Louis. Yeah, I was going to add St. Louis as well. Yeah. I've
heard some conflicting reports. Probably a guy to look at there. Andy Strickland would be a good guy to follow his Twitter feed. He's pretty clued in. But no, I do think G is going to leave. It's regrettable. But I look at it along the continuum of Matt Sundin versus Raymond Bourque. I mean, what's a win-win for the Flyers is to take the Raymond Bourque approach. To stay home like Matt Sundin didn't go over very well. And, of course, he ended up going to Vancouver anyway and playing somewhere else. So I think it would be best for all concerned if he did take the trade. And I'm anticipating this time next week he'll be in another city.
Okay. I really went back and forth on this, trying to put my finger on what I thought was going to happen. At some point, I really felt that he was going to stay in Philadelphia. At one point, I really, really felt he was going to stay, and the fact that he does hold all the cards. But when you see all the evidence out there, and if he, based off of everything that you guys have said, if he is that dedicated to the team, then he is looking to go to a team that he'll give Chuck a list of teams that he can go to. You know what I mean? That he'll accept a trade and he'll make get a trade to go to one of those teams. So now let's look at the destinations now. Okay, so we just saw the deal that Colorado just did, and that was potentially one of the players that could have potentially had come back for the Giroux trade in Colorado, right? And so we'll start with Isiah first. What do you think the deal would have to be from Colorado now that deal has been made?
Well, I believe the defenseman was someone named Drew Hellison. He's a good prospect. I think that there's another prospect that could be on the radar of the Flyers named Justin Barron. He's somebody. I mean, now that the situation in Colorado has changed with the injuries to Samuel Girard and Gabriel Landeskog, we could have a Tampa Bay Lightning situation if Landeskog, who chooses to get surgery now, anticipating he will be back, which seems to indicate that he'll probably miss the balance of the season if you're talking about a knee injury and most of the season.
Yeah,
I'm not sure.
Saying a month. I think they're saying a month.
The status of Samuel Girard, I'm really not sure. But I don't think it impacts it that greatly. I think if the Avalanche are really going for it, then I believe that they have some players. Obviously, if the Flyers had their druthers, they would rather have somebody like Alex Newhook. The Flyers have an extreme need at center ice. We saw that this year, even with the injuries, the lack of dynamic playmaking ability, and Morgan Frost struggling to handle some of the defensive responsibilities at this juncture of his career. So I would think that there's something still there with the Colorado Avalanche.
Okay.
And I certainly wouldn't rule them out just because they acquired Josh Manson in this trade. However, I would add a caveat. I don't know about their goaltending, and I'm not sure how Joe Sakic feels about it. I mean, they re-signed Pavel Francouz, and they have Darcy Kemper. Kemper is notorious, though, for breaking down. And he doesn't quite have the experience of somebody like Mark
playoff experience,
Fleury. Yeah. So, I mean, I don't think they're going to go for Fleury, but it wouldn't shock me if they at the last minute if you're going to go this far in with some of the contracts they're going to have to deal with, the Avalanche going forward, if they made a play in that direction.
So you think if they go after Giroux, they're going to go after Fleury or somebody like that as well, too?
I think it's an either or, actually. I don't think
okay,
they have that much because you only have so much capital, but they have to pay. I mean, I'm looking at them right now. I mean, they're going to lose Nazem Kadri. They got Burakovsky and Chuchkin. So they have a lot of contracts to sign. If they're going to go all in, it is possible they could go for both. You know, they could go for broke here like the Vegas Golden Knights.
Yeah, right. Jim, what do you think? Do you think the deal would have to be here for Colorado, for Giroux to go to Colorado?
I mean, the name Tyson Jost is interesting to me. I think there may be a player on the team now that is involved in the move. Maybe that changes because of the Landeskog situation. But I think they were probably having to get rid of some money in order to take on the money in order to make it work. And I really would love to get Tyson Jost here because I think he's a guy who has not had the chance as a top line guy.
Yeah.
He's considered one of the best forecheckers that they have. He just hasn't produced the way they expected him to produce. And then Barron's name I've heard a lot. So I've actually heard his name more than Ellison. So I don't think by any means, Steel, that deal is done. That the deal with the Colorado is out the window because of the Manson trade. I don't think so at all. Still very much out there. I know St. Louis is interested. I know Florida is interested. Carolina is interesting. I've not, in talking with their people, garnered as much interest as I have certainly from the other three that we talked about. But they have the tools to make the deal as well. So you look around, and then there's always a late team that can enter. So as Isaiah said, we're 6 days out from the deadline. We could talk about three teams here, and it might be three other teams that are bidding.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. So, and the other thing I would say about Claude is that if no deal is found that Chuck feels is really going to bolster the Flyers organization that much, he doesn't have to go. You want to move him, but if all you're going to get is like a second round pick in this year's draft, which is not considered a great draft, or even a late first round pick in this year's draft, I think the Flyers have in mind more than just that. So, and it's funny because when I see national shows and some national insiders, I hear him saying that, they're going to get less for him than Ben Sherratt's going to get the Canadiens. So, maybe we're overvaluing Claude Giroux because he's a rental. Maybe we're overvaluing him. I think it's going to go the other direction, though. As you get close to the deadline, people see a guy who can win faceoffs. He can play forward. He can play set, and he can play wing, play center. Obviously, has the pedigree to produce, and he's versatile. You like those versatile players come playoff time. So I think he's going to get the Flyers a pretty good return. But if for some reason that doesn't happen, I'm not saying it's 100% he goes. This isn't a situation where he has to get out of here. He doesn't really want to deep down leave. So if the deal isn't right, the deal won't be made.
Right. No, I'm with you on that. I've heard of also the same teams. And, look, Carolina doesn't necessarily need to do much of anything as much of where I think Colorado kind of finds themselves into a quandary with the injuries that have just occurred. And that kind of puts more of a onus on Colorado to get a deal done for somebody to try to help them take places of Landeskog and things of that nature. So that deal seems a lot more imminent, I would think, for Giroux.
Let me say here, Steel, the point made by Isaiah is a good one. If Landeskog becomes a Kucherov situation here and he's out for the rest of the regular season, then the money isn't as big a deal. They might not have to trade somebody off their roster to get Giroux. They'd probably from a Flyers standpoint, we'll have to up the ante prospect-wise. But it makes, I would think, if that's going to happen, and I'm not sure they're going to do that with Landeskog. I'm not sure that decision's even been made yet. But if it is, then that frees up money and I think it makes it more possible that Giroux is traded.
Yeah. That's I would have to agree with you on that one.
Steele, just one thing, just interjecting.
Yeah, go.
Just to double up on the motivation of Joe Sakic in Colorado. With all the contracts that he has to sign, the guys that are UFA, RFA next year, if you just look at it, I'm staring at it on Cap Friendly, that's as much motivation as anything. It's going to be a little bit of a different team next year. And I mentioned they were going to lose guys like Kadri and Josh Manson, who they just acquired, is going to be a UFA, and some of the other ones I mentioned before. So that could be a compelling, aspect to this as well.
And exactly. I will add to it further that if Josh Manson is a UFA to be fetches Hellison and a second rounder, Claude Giroux as a UFA is going to get more than that. So, Claude Giroux is a better player than Josh. Manson's a very good player and a player of need for Colorado for sure. But Claude Giroux is going to get you at least that, right? Probably more. So that might be where we've started now in the UFAs in terms of where we go from here and what teams get that Manson deal.
Right.
Yeah, Steel, I know we're going back and forth.
No, that's okay, because I don't think we're ever going to get a guy that is going to match Claude. No matter where we trade him to, you're never going to get a guy that's going to come back that's going to be his equal. You're going to have to do it by committee.
Well, no, you're not looking for that. I mean, first of all, he's 15 years into his career. So
right.
You're not, I mean, if you do, hats off. You've done a great job, but you're just looking to get assets. This team clearly,
right,
by what's happened this year, needs to add depth, not just down the middle. I mean, quite frankly, you almost have to hope that Sean Couturier is going to be Sean Couturier next year and that Kevin Hayes is going to be Kevin Hayes. And if they are, you can't really put too much more money into your center position because those two are obviously very expensive or pretty expensive. I mean, Sean Couturier is actually a deal if he's playing at his peak. But
right.
But bottom line is they also have wing issues. They have to add speed to the lineup. They clearly need to add another defenseman, I think, especially if Ellis' situation is tentative. And they're going to need a backup goalie possibly too. So I mean, there are going to be there's areas they can improve. Still, you're not going to get Claude Giroux the second, but you still can get a player or maybe two.
Agreed.
That can help you.
And that's kind of what I think what we're all kind of touching on here is that any team that's going to want to make a deal with the Philadelphia Flyers for Claude Giroux is going to have to make that kind of specific type of deal to where it's going to have to be either multiple ready to go prospects, I would say, maybe, or at least, really top high level first round draft picks. Do you know what I'm saying? I mean, go ahead, Isaiah. I know you were chomping a bit there a little bit. So go ahead.
No. I just as a comparable, back a couple of years ago, Paul Stastny, for example. Now, Paul Stastny, he was 32 at the time, so it's a couple of years younger than Claude. Not quite the scorer, but every bit as versatile.
Yeah.
And had a lot of pedigree in terms of playoff experience. So he garnered from Winnipeg a first-round pick, a B-tier prospect, and a fourth-round pick. So while adjusting for the fact that every market is a little bit different, it's more of a buyer's market this time out.
Yeah.
That's by position. So I mean, there's not a lot of forwards. It's a buyer's market for defensemen. There's a lot of them out there. So I think that's in the range of what you could expect for Claude. But I think that, and as this has been alluded to by a lot of the pundits, the Flyers wouldn't mind kind of like an already semi-developed player who's going through the system. And, JJ mentions Tyson Jost as one of those players who could be ready to break out. And we see that. We saw it with Patrick Sharp. So I'm not saying he's going to be that, but that.
I would be happy with something like that. I think anybody on the team would be happy to bring in a player of that particular level of quality for Claude Giroux. Look, we already know that the team is not going to get the Claude the second, like Jim said. You know what I mean? So I know one of the other teams that we mentioned as well too, and that was like Florida. And I would be really interested to hear your take on that, Jim, about Florida. What is in Florida that could be there for the Flyers? That, I mean, I know there's a lot of prospects and talent and everything, but what could that deal be?
Isaiah, I'll let you go with this one. I mean, they have talent. I'm not sure I would say they're as deep as Colorado in terms of prospect talent plus what they have in terms of players they could deal with, but there's talent there. I just think if Florida's worried about anything right now, they might want to worry about their goaltending. But I guess they could add. My question with Florida is, do you need Claude Giroux? That would be my question.
Okay. All right. Well, maybe you you also mentioned St. Louis as well too, and
there's history there. Obviously, Chief has coached him.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
Him, and
Schenner's there.
They do. St. Louis at times needs a little boost offensively. Florida, I guess you could go to the face-off situation, right? That would be where Claude would help them. But I mean, to be honest with you, any team could use a Claude Giroux. He's going to help you because he's so versatile. The team to me that could use him the most is Boston, but you never hear them mentioned.
Yeah,
so,
see,
it's possible that they're not on his list. Maybe that's why we don't hear him mentioned. I don't know. But
yeah.
I mean, Krejci, they really haven't replaced Krejci. I know they're getting some production now, secondary production, but Eric Howell. I mean, who do you want as your second line center? Claude Giroux.
Exactly.
So I mean, I'm surprised we haven't heard anything. So maybe that's one team that right away under not publicly, but Claude basically said, I don't want to go there. I don't know, but we have not heard that name very often.
Yeah, that's true. What do you think, Isaiah? What do you think on that?
Well, I agree. I mean, David Krejci is one of the most underrated players in the league, and the Bruins are feeling that this year. And this is what I've had to spread Pasternak and Marchand and Bergeron all over the lineup. And when you have a hole at center and you're one of the top teams, it really shows up in the playoffs. And then you go searching for that player. So if the Bruins really think that they have a chance to do something this year, that would probably be the best place for Claude Giroux. There is clearly the biggest need in Beantown for Claude Giroux, no doubt about that.
Have you heard any with your contacts? I've heard not even a mention of Boston.
Not Boston at all. Not even a hint.
No, I've heard the Rangers kind of kicking the tires.
Yeah.
I think one pundit said that, and I'm not a rumor guy. I'm only echoing people like NRD and things, other local pundits. So just to make it clear, Boston has supposedly, quote, kicked the tires. Well, I don't know if that was a Freeman or LeBron or NRD, but nothing. They haven't weighed in big time. The Rangers, if maybe the Flyers could extract a deeper price. I mean, Kravtsov would probably be right on the top of their list as a kind of disgruntled Ranger, which kind of scares me. All the Russian players want to play in New York, but really the kind of talent the Flyers could use. But I mean, it wouldn't shock me if something came together with the Rangers. Would the Flyers try to extract an in-division, kind of punitive extra required for that kind of player or that type of situation? We don't know.
Right.
The preference, I'm sure, would be sending out of the conference.
Right. Yeah, I'm with you on that one. Here's the sad part about this. The fact that we're even talking about this. The fact that Claude Giroux is going to play in his 1,000th game here in 2 days on Thursday. And, Jim, I'm assuming that you're going to be on the call for that game.
We have that one, yes.
Oh, goody. It's always disappointing when you go to turn on the game and it's not Jim making the call.
There's lots of good announcers out there, but I am selfishly very happy to be doing that game because, I've watched this kid go from a kid to, father of two and adult and, future Flyers Hall of Famer. And, it's just been great to watch his career and to be able to try to describe some of what he's done. So, I'm glad to be there for his 1,000th. And I think it is saying something that the Flyers are doing the ceremony before he actually plays in his 1,000th game, because usually they wait till they play and then the next home game you do it. And the next home game's Sunday. It's before the deadline.
Yeah.
I think it indicates to you that there are things happening.
Okay. So that's kind of what I was going to get at there too. So now, Isaiah, you've watched him now from, the first time he's put a sweater on and, he's going to play in his 1,000th game. And then, it's like, hey, thanks for your 1,000th game and see ya.
Yeah. I don't know if Claude is quite the player, but if I had to do a comparable, he's kind of like the Flyers version of like a Dale Howard-Chuck in terms of a guy who never really had a chance to I mean, Claude did play in the finals, obviously, but he was more or less a support player at that point. But as a featured star, like Howard Chuck, never really got the opportunity to take it to another level. And yeah, Howard Chuck always ran into Calgary or usually Edmonton, of course, out in Winnipeg. But Claude is one of the 5 top Flyers. I've followed the team for 52 years now. So I've seen a lot of great players, and he's definitely one of them. It's a shame that the management didn't do right by him, in my humble opinion, to put the players around him that could have put him at a loftier status and made him a shoo-in for the Hall of Fame. That being said, I think he's going to make it if he just has a couple more years and can do some other things in his career. But there's a sense of sadness that things are going to end if they do. That with the kind of condition the Flyers are in, the type of status they have in the league, it seems very doubtful that as a Philadelphia Flyer that Claude Giroux is going to go any further than he did in 2010.
Exactly, and I would have to pretty much ditto those sentiments. I mean, I got to watch him play his first game and watched his career all the way through, and watched this young man put a franchise on his back and carry them for the last 15 years. And anytime you talk or think or say anything Philadelphia Flyers, the first thing that you think of is Giroux. Okay. Now, I'm also with Isiah on that same fact as well, too, that they didn't hang another banner on the Wells Fargo Center next to him. I mean, they kind of did here and there, but it seemed like they brought in players that were exactly like him, and it just didn't quite equate to what it could have. Maybe.
Okay, I'm gonna totally disagree with you.
Yeah, I know. Go ahead.
Only because Claude will tell you himself, his playoff performances in the last four trips in have not been all that good.
No, I agree.
So 100%. It's not all. I mean, I hear this about Connor McDavid too out in Edmonton, that they haven't given him the players. You know, Sidney Crosby never complained about not having players. No, they say he had Malkin. Well, Connor McDavid has Draisaitl. They've added players. Sometimes the leaders just don't get it done. And I know there is a segment of Flyers fandom that feels that way about Claude. It's stretched. It's way over the top. It's not his fault they haven't won.
Oh yeah, no, I've never.
It could have been. It could have been much better if they had added a piece here or there. But actually, the Flyers tried and probably paid for it, and it really affected Claude's chance to win the Cup by going too far. And I'll give you the example. It was actually the last time that Ed Snyder really did do this before he went to Ron Hextall and decided to be patient. And that's why we've been through that rebuild phase for so long, and it just hasn't panned out. But my take on this all is they were close in Claude's early career. Clearly they were close. They were within 2 wins. But then they were close in a year or two after that. They had a little bit of a goaltending snafu. Peter Laviolette, who's a great coach, not necessarily a great goalie coach, but a great coach, I think kind of got the situation going with Bobrovsky. They ended up saying, we got to get another goalie in here, and they went and got Brizgalov. And that set the franchise back many years.
Yes.
Bob went on to win 2 Vezinas, although still not proven in the playoffs. Down in Florida, they're still worried about that. But Bottom line is he became one of the best goaltenders in the NHL. You don't win 2 Vezinas without being one of the top goaltenders, while the Flyers went through 5-6 different guys, and Briz was a disaster. That really did set Claude's chances to win a cup back, because what happened is they ended up going to a new regime, Ron Hextall, and his whole basically his MO was to build through the draft.
Yeah.
And Ed Snyder, in his dying days, actually bought into that, and they did. They got patient. They added all kinds of prospects, and we thought that was coming to fruition back in 2020. 2019, 2020, when the pandemic hit. And now what we're doing now is a whole nother story. But, it hasn't happened even now, because some of those prospects haven't really turned into the prospects that Ron Hextall and that a lot of us thought they were. They're good players, some of them, but they're not all-stars. They're not players that are taking them to a new level. So is that Claude's fault? No. But they were good enough to get into the playoffs a lot of times with the Claude as captain, and even his performance wasn't great either. So I'm not one that's going to say the Flyers didn't try to win for Claude. They tried to win very much so early in his career, maybe over-tried with the goaltender trade, which I think really set them back. Then Claude got caught up as a young veteran in a team that was rebuilding kind of from the bottom up under Ron Hextall. That took several years, and it would have all been great if they had continued to play great hockey in 2019, 2020. But then the pause hits, and Steel, I've told you this many times.
Oh, yeah.
Mid-November to the pause, the Flyers had the second best record in the NHL. They weren't doing it with mirrors. They were out shooting teams. They were out playing teams. Carter Hart was playing well, but he wasn't standing on his head. They were legitimately one of the top 2, 3, 4 teams in the league for a 4 or 5 month stretch. So at that time, and it's 2 years ago now, right? Almost to the day, everyone here thought the Ron Hextall rebuild, even though he was gone because of other circumstances, but it kind of worked. The young guys were developing. The veterans, the Giroux, Voraceks were still around and productive. They found their goalie in Carter Hart. It was working. The pause hits. They come out of the pause. They won the 3, round robin games, won a round, got in the second round. They weren't playing great hockey. I would argue that really since the pause, they never really found their mojo. And obviously last year and this year speaks for itself. What happened? That's a story for another day. As I said, the prospects, the Sanheims, the Provorovs, the Konechny's, they're good players, but they haven't taken that next step to be a Claude Giroux or to be a guy that's going to be an all-star, a guy that, is talked about as one of the top players in the league. So as a result, we're kind of in this area now where do they rebuild from the ground up again, or do they have trust in some of these young veterans and a good group of young players that are coming behind them that with some additions through the Giroux trade, through a couple of other trades, they can actually get this going next year. That's in a nutshell what happened. But in terms of how it's in context with Claude, I hesitate to go to they didn't give him enough. It's shame on the Flyers for not giving Claude Giroux enough, because they did try early on, maybe a little too hard, and then they went into a rebuild. So it wasn't like they weren't trying to win. They were trying to build this thing from the ground up. Yeah. And it looked to be working as recently as 2 years ago. It certainly hasn't worked here of late. But the bottom line is, I don't think that we can say they didn't give him the players, because it's on everybody. You get to the playoffs, your Claude Giroux have to carry you. And it didn't really happen. I'm not talking about just Claude. The veteran leadership of the team just didn't get him past the first round for all those years. The goaltending was part of that too, which of course wouldn't probably have been a problem if they hadn't made that original deal. But that's where we're at with me. I hear that with Connor McDavid. Oh, they're doing Connor McDavid a disservice. He's had Leon Draisaitl by his side the whole time. Darnell Nurse is one of the top young defensemen. He's had some other good players there. Zach Hyman. He's got good players this year. Is it all on the supporting cast, or maybe Connor just doesn't have that special thing to carry his team? And I'm not saying maybe Claude didn't have that either. I don't know. Claude Giroux has that will to win that nobody in my time here in Philadelphia has had. He wants to win more than anybody. I don't necessarily get that from Connor McDavid. But in the case of Claude Giroux, I mean, he will be the first to tell you it's not just organization's fault that they didn't get it done. It was a team thing, and he was part of that team.
Isaiah?
Yeah, I mean, I have a little bit of a different take, although I do believe that the original sin with Claude Giroux's career was a Brizgalov trade. It was over the top. It was an overreaction, so much so that Ed kind of told a different story a year later about how all that went down. God bless him. Well, we miss him. We sure do. But Flyers always had a problem with their when Pronger went out. That was a big issue, and that was a cultural issue. And I think there was a cultural malaise over the period with Hextall, and I don't think it's ever really resolved itself. I mean, you hear Bob Clark talking about what is, do we really have an identity? And I think there's an issue there. And they didn't really have a goaltender. They had spots where Steve Mason played well, but I always felt, Mason was the kind of guy, you could get him in a pressure situation, or when he had to grab the job and Ron Hextall put a challenge out there, how did he respond to that? And just same thing when he could have had a job. And as a free agent, he just chose to just, you know what, I think I'm going to call it a career. And I just think that there's some other things around it. I do think the way that trade went down and the necessity of moving Carter and Richards and everything kind of broke them in a lot of ways. So, and I don't think when they put the parts together, they won a lot of those trades. If you talk about value, but in terms of team building, it never really came together. And I think there was always kind of like a whack-a-mole type feel to the Flyers. Well, I think we solved this problem, but now we have a problem here. And currently, I think they have a situation right now, since Claude has moved over to the wing, that their center play is not very dynamic. They have lumbering guys that are tough to play against for different reasons, and Hayes and Couturier. But you see this year that they lack the dynamic element that Claude had in his prime years at center. So, I think Claude has not been the greatest playoff performer when the spotlight was on him. Yeah. But I think it's funny. I'm looking at all the highlight packages with Claude and all that, and you take for granted just how skilled he was. And when he was at the top of his game, like particularly like that backhand goal versus Columbus, falling away and how, getting past, I think it was McEnany was in the net, but just, and that shootout goal, and I think it was in Toronto where he makes that dazzling move, and
the Forsberg move.
Goal against Tampa where he has the wherewithal to lift the stick of Ryan McDonough as he's on his way in with the puck, and then beat, by the way, Andrei Vasilevsky. I've said this about Claude. The skill is evident every time he takes the ice. I don't know if there's a better player in the NHL moving the puck from his skate to his stick than Claude. He's unbelievable in that regard. He's also one of the most creative players I've ever seen. Even to this day now, he's kind of mastering this spin bounce shot from the neutral zone, which is giving goaltenders fits. And then he's got that bank play behind the net that he's using a lot more now.
Right.
Even at this stage of his career, he's still adding things to his game. He's very creative. But with all that skill aside, what has made him a great player is his will. People ask me my favorite moment with Claude Giroux. And I mean, there's so many of them. I did a story. I was talking with Charlie O'Connor today from The Athletic, and we were going through all these goals, and some of them I had forgotten. And it's like, wow, they really were a lot of them. But to me, it's still about a 30-second span in Game 7 against Boston in 2010, where he just would not give the puck away. And he's not the biggest guy. He had big guys on him, and he just wouldn't. It's the will that goes with the skill that makes this guy special. And that's why it's so disappointing that they didn't have playoff success with him, because I know he wants that more than anybody in the organization. Claude Giroux wants that playoff success, and they just didn't get it. I mean, they got it in the bubble a little bit, but that was totally different. As captain, he never got that long run. And you said he was a support player in 2010, but he was a very important support player.
Agreed.
I think to me, he at least proved then. There's some of these people out there who are saying, he's just not clutch. Well, I mean, he's been so clutch for this team in terms of regular season games and that run to the playoffs, which proves that he has it in his genes to be productive in the playoffs. Whether he has the seer on or not is a different story to me. Doesn't matter to me. In the playoffs, he helped the team get to within 2 wins of the Cup, so he can play in the playoffs. Now, did it happen later on in his career? No. The whole team kind of just couldn't get it done. But he's a clutch player. I mean, I don't. That whole argument to me is just kind of nonsensical. But they will always be able to point to the fact that as captain, he only got him past the first round once. They can say that, but they can also say Dan Marino, only got to one Super Bowl. Does that mean he wasn't a great quarterback? Wasn't a great clutch quarterback? He won a gazillion games during the regular season and late last minute drives, and he won some playoff games. But because he only went to one Super Bowl, I should say. I don't hear a lot of he wasn't clutch. Dan Marino wasn't clutch. So they should just back off that argument.
I equate that same. I'm glad you said that, Jim, because look, I'm not saying that the team didn't try to put people around Claude. What I'm trying to say is that they did try to put some people around him, but some of the moves that they tried to make to put those people around him weren't necessarily the best moves that helped propel him to where he needed to be.
It's such a generalization, though, Steel. Give me examples.
Okay, so
the biggest problem they had for a big stretch from 12 to Carter Hart was in goal.
That's what I was going to mention.
They didn't give him the goaltender, but they were they kind of were hamstrung by a contract for a while.
Right.
They had to go with Briz. Once they moved past Briz, okay, go out there and find goalies that were available. Maybe they think that. And it's easy to second guess. And I mean, Jake Voracek and he were a pretty good mix. I always thought they were two pass-first players. So maybe they should have gone out and gotten a Patrick Laine kind of player. I don't really, believe me, I'm not the biggest Laine fan, but a guy who's more
somebody like that.
Well, somebody like maybe Cam Atkinson a couple of years ago. And even now, Cam Atkinson, a great player who thinks shoot first. I've always thought the Flyers over the last 5-6 years needed more shoot mentality guys. So I'll give you that. But I still think they had teams in that run there that they should have done. They should have at least won one round some of the time in there, and they just didn't get it done. So the goaltending was a problem for a long time. And then again, that stretch in the late teens where they were kind of rebuilding. So I mean, Ron Hextall went into as close to a rebuild as this team has had since maybe the beginning of the Lindros era. So
yeah, maybe.
And you know, and to have also get this point out there, the turnaround can be quick. I mean, I was here in 1993 when this team played its second year with Lindros as a player, and they got off to a great start. And Dominic Roussel was the goalie, and they were flying, right? And then Eric hurt his knee, team fell apart. They missed the playoffs for the 5th straight year. And everybody was saying, oh, my, this franchise is, even with Eric Lindros, is a mess. And then the next year they started kind of slow. But Bob Clark came in to town next year to take over as GM in his second stint. Terry Murray is the head coach. And they made that trade with Montreal. And it wasn't like the team was showing signs before that trade that they had turned around. It was instantaneous.
Well,
Eric Desjardins arrived.
I mean, that's the guys you get. Jeez.
Right. And then the other example is 2006, 2007. Worst team, even worse than this year, folks. Worst team in Flyers history. Next year, they made the playoffs. 2 years after that, they were in the finals. So it can be quick, the turnaround. I think they're in position for this to bounce back. Again, health of Couturier and Ellis is probably a huge part of that because those are two humongous pieces. They're your best overall forward and, in my mind, your best overall defenseman. So, you know, that's tough to lose both of those pretty much for a whole season.
Right.
And, oh, by the way, throw in your second center and one of your other forwards in Farabee and all these other guys who've been out. I mean, I don't want to say this was all injuries this year, but they really never got a chance to show what Chuck Fletcher put together. I mean, the too many of the important pieces weren't there. So now they're going to get another try next year. They're going to look different, but they're going to add some pieces, we would assume, here at this trade deadline. Maybe add a piece who can even contribute next year in the draft. I don't know that. This draft isn't heavy with players that are necessarily going to step right in. But bottom line is, I think this can turn around as early as next year. This team could be in the playoffs. So I don't think it's like they're miles and miles away that I keep hearing from some people that you guys have even had on your shows.
Well, let me answer the first part. I'm not trying to blame the organization for not putting teams around him, because he is responsible for his own play as well too. And yes, he is a clutch player in the regular season and was able to make a run there in 2010. But I also agree that the Brizgalov trade was a major setback for them all the way around. I mean, they're still paying Brizgalov money. Okay, it's 2022 now, and they're still paying him $1.6 million a year till 2024. So.
That's good work if you can get it, I'll tell you.
Right, you know what I mean?
Bobby Bonilla has a better one in baseball.
Okay, right.
Still getting paid.
But you mentioned it, though, Jim. You said it. They got a Voracek, which is another pass guy. They didn't really get that shoot first guy. They had a lot of rotation in goal. And then a lot of what you said before, the prospects didn't step up. They had to do a rebuild with Hextall. And there was all of these things that contributed to why Claude Giroux didn't get another good run. So that's what I'm talking about as far as the organization kind of, I mean, they tried. They did try, but it didn't work.
No,
okay.
results speak for themselves. They
exactly
won one playoff series from
okay.
2013
so
to
that's all I was trying to point out was that yes, the organization did try, but it didn't work out, and Claude Giroux didn't get to do those, playoff games and win those playoff series and win those Stanley Cups like we all thought he could have. Like we all know he has the talent to do so. Okay, so now we're looking towards the future. We're looking towards all this great stuff, and they went out and signed Risto for 5 years, $5.1 million. And Isiah, what do you think of that move?
Well, I understand why they did it. I realize they put a lot of resources into the player. You have to put that aside if you're a professional general manager. Okay, I paid what I paid. Then you watch the player and you look at some of the cultural shifts and some of the, I guess, more subjective attributes he brings. And it's great. He's exciting. He makes the kind of hits that the fans love to see, but he also shuts down plays and turns play the other way. And that's something the Flyers haven't had almost since Pronger. And he's a talented guy. He's got a lot of tools. But my problem with it is you have to look at least the way I'm approaching this in terms of the Flyers. I look at their top four because to me, third pairs a lot of times are interchangeable from one team to another. And for me, the Flyers have really lacked good decision-making on the blue line for a long time. And they finally get somebody in Ryan Ellis. And of course, I think Matt Niskanen also was a calm decision maker.
Mm-hmm.
And they really haven't had players like that in abundance really since Chemo left. I think Mark Streit was kind of like halfway there, but not really appropriate, more of a second pair guy. And now what do you have? You have Ryan Ellis, who, if you get 65 or 70 games out of him, that's a win. Especially, we can say that this year, especially. We only got four games. And then you have Provorov, who's really struggling, going into his 7th year next year. We have Sanheim, who's on the ascendancy, who appears to be becoming almost like a Jonas Brodin kind of player, a calm, collected, but he's not quite there yet. And then you have a player like Risto, who's not a good decision maker, who consistently is at the bottom of the analytics charts in terms of driving play, shots against, goals against versus playing without him, with him. It all adds up to really deep in the red negative analytically. And my feeling is that it puts the Flyers in a very precarious position with Ivan Provorov or Sanheim. It almost like they have to choose between one of these guys because the Flyers have to have another professional defenseman who can make really good decisions consistently so they don't crater like we saw this year. If Ellis is not there, then we get Provorov, who 3 out of the last 4 years has not played well. And this year, to me, was among his worst years. And you have a iffy situation where Sanheim seems to be carrying Ristolainen, and you got 5 years of that. I like Risto. There's so much to like when you watch him play. But if we're just being objective, it almost means that the Flyers have to move on from one of Sanheim or Provorov to avoid the type of scenario that they had this year. Otherwise, you're relying on Ryan Ellis to be healthy, and I don't think that's a plan after Chuck Fletcher says, I can't go through another year like we went through last year, and here we are. It's worse. So a lot of that I put on the defense. And with that criteria in mind, I'm not really happy about the signing only for that reason. I love the guy. I love the player. He's not Andrew McDonald. It's nothing like that. That was a bad contract. Risto has attributes if he's surrounded by better players. But all things considered, I wish the Flyers had passed on that and took the assets, said thank you, Risto, and moved along.
Well, Jim, I know you got something to say about this, so I'm interested to hear what you think.
Everything he said is I understand. Would you say he is a top 4 defenseman in the NHL?
It's marginal. I think it depends on who he's partner dependent, a lot like Provorov.
Yeah. I mean, I think he's no doubt a top 4 defenseman. I'm not saying he's a top 2, but I do believe he's in that 3-4 slot. And he brings, should you get to the playoffs, an element you have to have. The Flyers do not have it in any other pair. I mean, Justin Braun is as solid as a rock, but there's no guy back there you have your head up with against the Flyers, except for Risto. And now my partner Keith Jones should be here right now, because he will tell you that Risto on the open market gets $6.5 to $7 million, and he will do it with a straight face. I will sit here and argue with him on that. I say I think he probably got what he deserved, or maybe a little less. I thought maybe he'd get to where he was with his previous contract in the 5.5 range. So there are those who think 5.1 isn't bad at all for Rasmus Ristolainen, and that it's not Rasmus that's the problem, it's who he's been playing with. And I know when you do the analytics, and this is where I start, I look at analytics. My son's into analytics, but when you get a player that's been with bad teams, and unfortunately this year's Flyer teams fit with the Sabre teams that Ristolainen has played on his entire career. I mean, I don't think it's Rasmus bringing all the teams down. I mean, the Sabres this year are proof of that. I think it's more that the players around him have brought his numbers down. So I think it's the other way around, Isiah. I think that when you get him around better players, and I think Sanheim qualifies as that, and you get, I mean, to be honest with you, the third pair of the Flyers D this year has killed them. It's killed them. And I'm not going to get into naming a specific player, but the bottom line is the third pair is so heavily minus with so limited amount of 5-on-5 ice time. That I don't mind if Ellis is healthy next year. And then, oh, by the way, one of the guys who I think can solve some of the problems you mentioned, Isiah, is Cam York. I think Cam York is a very good player. I don't like the fact that he's on his wrong side right now. They're going to play him with Provorov. Still on the wrong side. I think you got to get your young players, your Morgan Frost and your Cam Yorks and your good young players, and put them in a position to succeed when they're first getting into the league. I don't think throwing him on the offside is a good thing. And at first they were doing that because he was playing with Keith Yandle, and it came down to the streak and all this stuff. But the bottom line is York is going to be part of that mix too. So you got to throw him in there, and you Ellis hopefully is back. I mean, Ellis's injury this year is unrelated to his other injuries. So his one injury, his last injury in Nashville, was a knuckle. I mean, it's not like, I mean, he's going to block shots. He's going to get hurt. Provorov's ridiculous in that he blocks so many shots, and he's never been hurt in his career. Most defensemen who block shots get hurt. That's going to happen. But he should next year be, Ryan Ellis, a regular player. He should be with the team and play 60, 70 games, let's hope. And if that's the case, I don't mind their top four. And it's really 5, but I don't mind their top 4. They obviously will have to get a better form of Ivan Provorov. Sanheim is showing some really good signs. And if York continues to develop, I still think they'll go out and get another one for the third pair, but that's probably going to be more of a veteran defenseman. But in my opinion, when you say the defense killed him this year, Ivan Provorov, perhaps to some here down the stretch, he's making some huge mistakes and so forth. But if you look at the numbers, I don't want to throw all the other stuff into what I think was a depth issue there, but maybe a depth issue caused by the fact that, they had this situation going there. I mean, it's tough. And then the forwards, they were hit pretty hard with injuries. So, I mean, they had to have more depth there. They need more speed too. Chuck's talked about this. If you look at the Flyers draft choices over the last several years, up until this year when the second rounder had speed, they didn't have a first round pick, but most of their picks have been, you read the scouting report, it's all great hockey sense, IQ, sees the ice well, strong, we'll work on his skating, or we'll get skating, we'll get, and I mean, this game is so fast now, and it's not all about the foot speed. Some of it's just about the puck movement speed, but they do need, I think, more speed. So,
speed kills.
Jost and some of these guys, names you're hearing, I think they're going to try to inject speed into the lineup.
I agree. The Ristolainen deal.
Let me make. I never even talked about that. Risto, to me, is a top 4 defenseman. So if you think that top 4 defensemen are worth $5 million a year in terms of the cap hit, then it's a good deal, because he's not only a top 4 defenseman, he's one that brings that edge, which is not something that's measured in analytics very much, but it's certainly something you need on your team and definitely need
exactly
playoff time. So I mean, Keith Jones is doing somersaults over the fact that they got him for 5.1. I'm not doing somersaults, but I think it's a good deal. I do think they gave up maybe too much to get him in the first place.
Ding, ding.
So you know, with all, because it's not just the trade to Buffalo, it was also the ghost trade.
Yep.
Was done to make that. So that's a lot of capital.
A lot of stuff that went
in one player who's not a number one defenseman or something. So given that, I think people are like, oh, they gave up too much or whatever, but they're getting a player now for 5 years at 5.1 who's definitely can serve a role. So the contract itself, I don't have a problem with.
My take on Ristolainen is that I agree that, his analytics and Corsi's are beyond even, like, he's not even the top 100 when it comes for defensemen on 5-on-5. He's like minus 111 or something stupid like that, right? Or minus 129 or something like that for the season. Okay. So when you look at his analytics and go, well, man, all right, that's not a good player analytically. But there's something too that I'm going to also have to agree with you on. When you watch the warm-ups during the games and you watch Ristolainen out there on the ice doing the warm-ups and you watch the other team coming across, they don't come across over there when Ristolainen's out there. Okay? And I also
we're winning the warm-ups. That's a good thing.
Okay, right? So even during the warm-ups, right? So now I've also noticed this too, is that when covering the games, he also has that presence where you don't touch Claude Giroux. You don't touch this player because you're going to have to answer to him because he has that presence. Now, according to all the numbers and everything, the type of player that he is, and you add all that up and you roll it all up, is he worth $5.1 million a year? No, not in my opinion. I think he's worth about $4 million a year for about 4 years. Okay. But they gave up and moved so much to get him on the team that they really kind of were up against a hard place to a certain extent, because how could you not give up all of that for one player and then not be able to re-sign him the next year? Do you see what I mean? So I think some of that had to play into this contract in some way, shape, or form. Maybe not in the front, but somewhere in the back of Chuck's mind, he's like, man, I just gave up all this stuff for this guy. I better be able to re-sign him.
I think that was his thinking when he made the trade. So, of course, that probably held. I just need to get you guys, two of you guys, to sit down with Keith Jones. I'll give Jonesy 15 minutes with both of you, and you'll both be the biggest Rasmus Ristolainen fans in the world. He used to.
Anytime, Jim.
Flyers used to play the Sabres, and we go to break, and he go, we got to get that guy in orange and black. We got to get that guy in orange and black. And I go, Jonesy, the numbers are really ugly. He said, I don't care about the numbers. I play the game. I watch the game. I know what affects the game. And he's convinced they absolutely got a steal at 5.1.
Okay.
Got that steal? We got a steal.
I got you. I'm with you. So anytime.
I like that.
Anytime. See how Jim is? He's just so smooth, right?
Oh, yeah.
So anytime you want to bring Keith Jones, bring Keith Jones, you name the time and place and date, and I will be there. I will be there.
This podcast, you got to go on because they're really bashing Rasmus. And I mean, you guys did it both in a balanced way. Believe me, I'm not saying you're bashers of Rasmus. You talked about his strengths as well as his weaknesses, but he just basically is convinced that he is an element they have to have. And
I agree.
The other numbers are affected more by what he's been around than by him himself. And I know there are analytics numbers where you can take him away from players and the other players' numbers go up.
Right.
I try to tell Jonesy that, but he's convinced. And I'm with him. I'm not maybe quite as strong as he is in the Ristolainen court, but I've watched the games this year. He has brought something the Flyers need. I think Zach McEwen's done the same.
Agreed.
They have to have that moving forward. So,
agreed.
Do you pay $5.1 million just for that? No, because this guy's also someone they have not utilized enough in the power play. He's got a humongous shot if they use him back there, and he also,
coaching,
as we're starting to see, can use him net front. So,
coaching.
There are other ways you might be able to use him too.
Yeah, coaching, I think, has been the huge issue, and that's something that you touched on earlier too. And I think that's what has been one of Ristolainen's biggest issues. He played for a team in Buffalo that wasn't that great, and didn't have the best coaching. It wasn't in the best situations. They tried to make him a number one defenseman, and he is not.
Right.
Okay,
Buffalo.
Buffalo,
they did this with Tyler Myers.
Yeah,
he has one good year, hasn't been the same player. They did this with Zadorov.
Yep.
Who I think could have been like a better version of a Sam Morin. I mean, I love Sam and all that, but I think he had a little bit more going for him. But again, you ruin these guys. And I always contrast that with what St. Louis did with Alex Pietrangelo. Really struggled out of the gate, and they're very patient with him. And look at it now. I mean, it's paying dividends, and good defensemen can play for 15 years in this league. It's worth taking your time.
You know what? St. Louis is a great example of that, Isaiah. Giroux. There are a lot of players that St. Louis, they let them develop. And Ron Hextall would probably be sitting next to me right now saying, see, I told you so, because he was always, when we'd push to get a guy called up, he'd say, they're not ready yet. And even when they look ready, sometimes they're not ready yet. And then there are other players, Cale Makar, there are other players that are ready right off the hop. I think Cam York actually is a player who's better at this level than he is at the AHL level, because there's more structure up here. But there are also players that definitely need time to get that time in the AHL or wherever, even in a lower role with the NHL team, before they emerge as a go-to guy. And Pietrangelo is a great example. And St. Louis, we were noticing when the Flyers played them, how many of their picks are from like 14, 15 that are now really good players that are just emerging. And, that's a long time to that's 5-6 years ago when they were drafted. That took them to find their niche. And sometimes it takes that long. And, the Flyers are kind of hoping that with Morgan, it's not even near that long yet, but he's now 22, right? And Morgan Frost, they're hoping that he's getting, I'll tell you what, the last game, he looked like a player with a little confidence that if he can keep that up, he's going to make mistakes. I mean, if they expect him to be a guy who's never going to turn the puck over or make mistakes that are favoring offense over defense, I don't think he's ever going to be the Selke Trophy guy. But he is a guy who can really create offense for you, and hopefully they allow that, because that's what they say in Montreal that Marty St. Louis has done with that team. I mean, Cole Caulfield's taken off since he took over as coach. Why? Because his first thing he said to Cole was, "You go out and do what you do, which is score goals, and we'll work our system around you." trying to fit a square block into a circle hole, right? I mean, so, I mean, it's worked for St. Louis in Montreal, and I think it can work certainly here with some of the Flyers young players.
Yeah, if I could just piggyback that, I think one of the things, and JJ, you mentioned this earlier, is that you want to put these guys in a better position. When you talk about Cam York on his offside, and that was a devil's bargain they made with Yandel. I know why. Part of the reason they wanted Yandel here might have had to do with some of the chemistry and a little bit of support for
or maybe that calming effect
for Kevin Hayes.
Lacking.
Look, like those guys are buds. We get it.
It's really Kevin Hayes. It's a really good. I mean, they are very tight, and several other players too.
But Frost, look, we had Simon Gagne come out of juniors as a center. He ended up on the wing. And it was the exact opposite with Claude Giroux. You have to put these players in positions where, like you were talking about, round peg, square hole. I don't think Morgan Frost for the foreseeable future is the center. I don't think he's viable. I think it's too much on his plate. He missed, 18, 19 months because of injuries and things like that. Put him on the wing, and like they did with Cole Caulfield, let him do his thing. Not like crazy about it. Let him get confident at the things that he's good at that compelled the Flyers to draft him in the first place. And the same thing with Cam York. I mean, it's really frustrating. I don't think Keith Yandle's going to go anywhere this trade deadline. Probably not. But really, for Cam York, I'd like to see him on his left side on that third pair. It would be better for him. And I think the Flyers have to concentrate after the trade deadline on getting him and Isaac Ratcliffe, who also looks better as an NHL player, and get him in a right spot with good players. And then let's see what we have. And it could help them make better decisions as they go into the offseason.
And I will say this about tomorrow or Thursday's game. York's playing still is offside, but with Ivan Provorov.
Yeah.
He's not the top pair. So we'll see. I'm excited to see that.
Yeah, me
I
too.
think in the offensive zone, he'll be fine, because when you're playing your offside in the offensive zone, it's actually easier, right?
Yeah.
Defensive zone, he's going to have the same struggles, and people are going to have to be patient. There's going to be times he's going to give the puck away, or he's not going to just be comfortable in the defensive zone. But I agree with you. The left side third pair would have been a perfect place for him to kind of get his feet wet at the NHL and on the power play at the NHL level. But now I'm at least happy to see him play with Provi. We'll see what happens. And, Provi, maybe it's the bump that Provi needs too, to get over the problems he's had of late. So I'm excited to see that for sure.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, see, folks, we brought in this great panel so that we could sit down here and talk about Philadelphia Flyers and all things Philadelphia Flyers. Isiah from O B PuckCast, why don't you tell the folks how we can get you, where we can find you, and how we can listen to your great show, sir?
Oh, sure. You can check out the O B PuckCast at O B Puck, at O B Puck on Twitter. We have a Facebook page. Check us out on YouTube. Just punch in O B PuckCast, and we're on, I think it's 12 podcast platforms, including Apple, SoundCloud, Spotify, iHeart, Stitcher, you name it.
Awesome. And the voice of the Philadelphia Flyers, Mr. Jim Jackson. Why don't you tell us about your school that you got there, Jim, your broadcasting school, and how that's been going?
Yeah, it's going well. We started it back in November of 2020. To get the years straight these days, it's hard to do.
I know.
And it's gone really well. We've had a good response. Right now I'm into one-on-ones, but the schedule's pretty tight here in March, April. But once the season is over, I'll open it up for all one-on-ones in the summer. And then we're going to have a camp probably in August where it's a little bit less expensive. It's basically a group thing as opposed to one-on-one. But I offer 3 1-hour Zooms to talk about broadcasting. I've got a whole plethora of things we talk about. Depends on what your interest in the business is. I tailor make it to you, and we get to know each other, and then you can consider me your mentor for as long as you want me after that. So, and it's worked out well. Steel, one of my prized pupils, it's been a situation that I've really been happy to do. It's very rewarding. I've had one guy who's now doing AHL hockey, who started in U.S. junior hockey. I've got another one that's in high school, and he just got accepted to Syracuse. And it's almost like being a father all over again. You're kind of like a proud papa when you see these things happen, and always willing to help these people as they begin. And the business is crazier than ever. So you need all the help you can get.
Yep.
For sure. Jim, thank you very much for being here, man. I appreciate all that you do and for being that voice of the Philadelphia Flyers and for being that calming voice too. Isiah, thank you very much.
I don't know if I was very calming today. By the way, JimJacksonBroadcasting.com. That's the
I will have all of that information out there for everybody on the links. So I'll have all that out there. All you have to do is go to the website, and you can sign up for Jim's class. And I can honestly tell you that you get to learn from an Emmy award-winning broadcaster. So if you can't take solace into that, then I don't know what you can take solace in, because you learn from the best in the biz right there. So thank you very much.
We're all after solace. I tell you, we want that solace.
That's right. We're all.
Let me say this: very impressed with your knowledge and the way you basically tackle issues from a rational standpoint as opposed to emotionally, and you have research to back it up. So that's good stuff.
See, I told you I don't bring no slouches here, Jim.
I never in a million years thought you would. You've always had impressive panels here.
That's right. Yeah. Thank you guys for watching. I'm SteelFlyers, your host. This is Isiah from O B Puck and Jim from NBC Sports Philadelphia, and I am SteelFlyers. Just remember, folks, stay safe, stay strong, and hang tough.